Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E1 for the November 2014 sitting. And in this particular screencast, we're just going to look at offshoring and really the upside and the downside for a country or for a company offshoring operations to an emerging country. Okay, so in terms of the scenario here, I've covered this in another video, but essentially what you have is GBanking Group looking to offshore their back office operations to India. And what we'll see here is that there are 500 jobs going, and a similar number being developed in India. Some issues with regard to the reaction to the redundancies, not overly relevant to our issue of offshoring. So what we'll see from the answer here is that one of the first things that they do in this first paragraph is just make it clear that the person writing the answer knows exactly what offshoring is. So what is offshoring? Well, essentially what we're talking about is just the relocation of a particular process, a particular part of a business from one country to another. And I think it's important here to distinguish offshoring from outsourcing. This is something that is commonly examined at E1. Obviously, outsourcing is really farming out one element of operations to another supplier or another provider. Okay, so what we'll see is that quick definition of what offshoring is. They do mention this idea of sort of migration of jobs from a richer to a poorer country, and you'll see to a large extent, you know, in terms of these sort of the upside certainly with offshoring, it is very much cost related. Okay, now the way that the requirement is worded, essentially what we can do is use a sort of a list style approach. So what they do is they go straight into advantages. They make it clear what they're doing. And the first point, as I've said, that they mention is just this idea of cost. So certainly the initial drive is cost-based, but there are some other factors outside of cost. So let's take them one by one. First thing that they do is that they talk about this sort of workforce, in other words, a well-educated workforce, and indeed underemployed workforce. So that certainly makes it attractive, as does the likely wages. You often find, though, that currently the wages levels in some countries, particularly countries like India, are indeed rising, and you find some companies, in fact, nearshoring, bring operations back to the UK or another westernized country. That's not overly relevant here. What we're asked for is the key upside, and certainly well-educated pool of workers whose wages perhaps are comparatively lower. Okay. Next point is just in terms of the actions of the local government and their sort of drive in terms of IT and communications. So you'll find that over the last sort of 20 years or thereabouts, you'll find that a lot of countries will have made it much more attractive to offshore there, particularly by looking at IT infrastructure and indeed infrastructure as regards transport. Okay. Next point is that in terms of an upside, by locating an office or part of an office or part of operations, this will enable the company to certainly cut costs by standardizing and controlling that particular operation in a single location. Okay. Next point that we see here is just really this idea of sticking to the knitting. In other words, this particular company, GBanking Group, is obviously involved in the banking sector, and by offshoring something that's perhaps non-core, in other words, not a core competence, what they'll be able to do is really stick to what they're good at, stick to the more complex aspects, and really achieve economies of scale by indeed specialization and division of labor. One or two other points here that are relevant. Certainly the speed may be something that is increased in terms of ability to service customers. You may well find that that's not specifically relevant depending on the country that's involved. The other point is really sort of broadening their sales base. If they're offshoring to a country that they don't have a presence, it may well be that they're opening up a sales market, another market for themselves. So sales to that offshore country. Okay. Now, problems, quite a few problems, and as I've said here, often linked to working in a different culture or a country perhaps with different working practices. And you'll see that the sort of broad sort of pest headings are helpful here: political, economic, etc., etc. So, in terms of first key problem, certainly cultural problems, and that is everything from sort of language to custom. Could be things that create conflict or possibly even misunderstanding. So if we're talking about offshoring, we've got to be thinking about cultural issues. Next point is just the political side. Some of the countries perhaps that you would think that would be suitable may well be coming from historically slightly iffy political places, and as a result of that, some of their policies may be more complex than would be expected in the home country, and then that can involve costs, possibly legal costs, or indeed planning and setup costs. Next point is just the idea of working in a different sort of exchange mechanism, or indeed a different currency. So exchange issues could be problematic. It may well be the exchange rate is unstable, or it may just be the costs of exchange. Okay. Next point sort of links into the point above in terms of culture, language, and indeed this is something that you'll always see in this type of question in terms of a downside: potential time differences. Okay. Next point, the technical side. You may well find that in fact some of the countries you'd be expect to offshore to may in fact have better qualified staff than in the home countries, but in some cases it may well be that the technical ability of staff is really not up to speed, and there may be some costs associated with that. Over and above that, obviously the supply chain, looking down the supply of either products or indeed services to the company itself, it may well be that some work is required, or perhaps some additional costs are required. Next point, obviously we're working in a different jurisdiction, so it may well be that there's a potential sort of loss of confidentiality, perhaps in terms of IP or intellectual property. So there may well be some legal costs. As I said above, certainly the PES model, when you're looking at this idea of offshoring, is something that you should be wheeling out and trying to think of points under each of the PEST headings. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. That's just a quick run through offshoring downsides and upsides. Quite a popular topic for your examiner, so I'd certainly make sure that you have this the information within this question in your armory. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.